U.S. farmers planted 90.2 million acres of soybeans this past spring, a new high by about 6.8 million acres. Meanwhile, with data going back to 1919, producers put fewer wheat acres into the ground than ever before. If the U.S. Department of Agriculture's early projection holds, those records would be even more pronounced next season. We recently talked with Frayne to get his outlook for 2018, but we started by asking about the adjustment in acres over the last few years.
Well, okay, so just to recap really quick, the corn acreage has been bouncing around a little bit, but we did take a little bit of a cut last year in corn acreage. So we took about 4 million acres out. The soybean acreage has been climbing consistently, and a lot of that has been driven by very strong international demand. The wheat acres is usually where all of the soybean acres have been coming from. We've been stealing a little bit from corn and more of it from wheat, so both the winter wheat as well as spring wheat acreage has been slipping over the last several years. So the general trends, corn a little bit variable, soybeans increasing, wheat decreasing.
As you pencil out the numbers for 2018, what are the economics of each commodity?
Yeah, so corn is going to be a little bit marginal given what we see today. Obviously, the forecast for yield or kind of trend line yields, what kind of an increase do we get next year is going to be a critical factor. At least up here in the northern plains, we're getting a lot of questions about corn acreage and whether they should continue to grow corn. We're in the transition area. As I look at the economics of it, I think it'll be kind of a push year. I really don't expect any major changes or shifts in corn acreage. My back of the envelope calculations at this point will be that we'll keep about the same acreage. We'll be in that 90 million acre range, plus or minus a little bit. Soybeans is the one that still pencils out, especially in these newer growing regions where you don't have the disease pressure or the insect pressure. Our fertility levels are still pretty good. You can make the soybeans pencil pretty well, and the demand base again is there, so prices have been holding a little bit stronger. Wheat is going to be the struggle, and I really want to think about wheat in two pieces, the winter wheat section and then the spring wheat portion. Right now, winter wheat prices are extremely low relative to the cost of production. I do expect to see the winter wheat acreage to slip as we find out in January what the official numbers are. And both hard red winter wheat as well as soft red winter wheat. Again, the hard red winter wheat being the larger acreage base of the two. On the spring wheat side, the economics of spring wheat are a little bit different than the winter wheat side. In the spring wheat, we had a much shorter crop last year because of the really dry conditions we had here in North Dakota and into eastern Montana. The drier conditions are still there, so farmers are a little bit concerned about not having any snowfall yet and what that means for spring planting. But I think there'll be more interest in spring wheat as we move forward. Again, it's an earlier season crop. If we get some rains in the springtime, it isn't as dependent upon those late season rains like for corn and soybeans. So I think we'll see a little bit of an increase in spring wheat acreage again in 2018.
You mentioned you didn't see much change in corn. Soybeans last year, or soybeans this year, were about 90 million, just a shade over 90 million in planted acres. What do you think it'll be in 2018?
So to get specific numbers, my best guess is that, again, corn will be about at 90 million acres, plus or minus a little bit. I think soybeans will actually push closer to 92, maybe just a little under that. I think we can pull, almost 1 million acres out of the wheat complex. I think we can steal a little bit from cotton. I think there might be a little bit from sorghum that we can steal. So I do expect to see, again, a cutback in winter wheat acreage specifically, and then the bump, again, not quite 2 million acres in soybeans. So I think we'll be pushing closer to 92 there.
Do the alternative crops come in, especially up in North Dakota where there's been drought? Could you see more alfalfa or pasture land that comes back into production?
So one of the other wild cards, and I know when we do the math on acreage and trying to get this acreage split, worked out, one of the areas we sometimes forget is hayland. And the hayland kind of separates into two categories. One would be alfalfa hay, one would be the grass hays. The alfalfa hay is the kind of the target audience now for some higher productive soils, higher productive land. And so it is possible to do some shifting between alfalfa and corn or alfalfa and soybeans, depending upon where you are in the country. So it might be possible to steal a little bit there. The minor crops, the specialty crops, in our region, those are really, really important. But if you look at the national level and look all the acres that are available, it really doesn't allow us to add a lot of new acres to be able to steal from these minor crops, because these minor crops or the smaller market crops are usually very specialized crops, and the buyers of those are willing to pay a little bit more to maintain their acreage base. It's not that they need a lot of extra acres, but they do want to work pretty hard to hold those base acres together.
There have been rumblings about CRP acres, not that that's anything new. Do you see a way that CRP is a factor over the next few years here?
Well, short term, I think it's going to be pretty difficult. We have the acreage base for CRP pretty much locked in. As we start moving forward, we might see some shifting because of budgets and the budget allocations and looking at the new farm bill and the cost of the new farm bill. And one of the areas that people might looking to save some money as well as conserve some of the acreage then would be to open up some of those CRP acres. There's going to be some questions about the productivity of that land. There's a reason that those acres went into CRP. Again, they were put in for conservation purposes. Some of it has to do with wind erosion, some of it has to do with water quality. So I think there'd be a little bit of hesitancy to release too many acres, again, given that the low commodity prices are around and there really isn't this major push for increased plantings to try and rebuild stocks.